Australian Tapestry Workshop for giving me this opportunity with the artists in residence, and also thank all the staff and leaders here who have been really welcoming and friendly, and it's a very fascinating process to watch the tapestry being made. Okay, so I haven't been an artist for a very long time, so, and I still don't really think of myself as an artist. I think I'm more a weaver than an artist, but that's sort of another topic altogether. I want to start off with one of my first work that I submitted to the Wangaratta Petite exhibition. I did these just after I had attended the 8th International Shibori Symposium in Hong Kong. And I was fortunate enough to meet Yoshiko Wada and a few other textile people such as Jack Leonard Larson and Liz Williamson. And I was fortunate also enough to work with Yoshiko Wada to install an exhibition. And it was my first experience of a professional textile exhibition, and she encouraged me to think about that as part of my weaving practice. And as part of that program, she gave a lecture on Slow Fibre, and she emphasized to us that we need to understand the materials that we're working with in order to create something different, something special, something unique. So from then on, when I got home, I sort of thought, okay, I've got to make the most of that opportunity, and before I forget, I should get on with things. So my first work was to explore the notion that in understanding the fibres that I work with, I can manipulate them with control. So it's sampling and working with materials so that I know how they behave on their own and how they behave with other fibres. So these are the pieces that I submitted to Petite in, I think it was 2012. So the first piece is working with plant fibre, which was cotton, and a silk stainless steel fibre, which is mineral, the second piece, and the third one is a combination of the first two plus cashmere, which is an animal fibre. So the pieces were called plant, mineral, and animal based on the fibre type.
So yeah, it's really hard to hear you.
Oh, sorry. So they were dealing with the three types of material, which is plant fibre, mineral, which is silk stainless steel, and animal, which was cashmere. So the first piece is just cotton and mineral. The second is with stitching to see how to form shapes, and the third one is working with all three plant, mineral, and animal fibres. So with all my work, I With all my work, I have the process of looking at the design, the outcome that I want to achieve, and then the material that I need to use in order to achieve that, and looking at my level of skill and technique also in order to achieve the outcome. So with these ones, I experimented with shrinkage and documented the amount, so all the samples were measured so that I could form a circle in that first bit. So I figured out that in the end, everything shrinks by about a third. So I had to figure out how to draw an ellipse that then shrinks enough to form a circle. So it's this level of figuring out the material and the technique. The next one is then the first of my bigger pieces of work, and it was the first in a series of gridded cities. This is an exploration of my identity and a question of place, because I think place and identity are very important to me because I have lived in different places, and Melbourne is the first part of my identity because I was born here and I've lived here for more than half my life now. And it's also the city that I obtained my education in both architecture and in weave. And this piece was woven in plain weave, in a double weave where two layers intersect. So it's a little bit like architecture and weave intersect in my life as well. And the multiple lines intertwine to form layers of intersecting planes and meaning in the same way a city is made up of streets, buildings and open spaces. So that's probably done at a time where I was transitioning from architecture to weave as well. Again, with this one, it's figuring out the design, the material, and the technique that I could use, and figuring out what sort of map I wanted to use. And I actually wanted to weave something that was to scale, so rather than just a stylized symbolic map. And then to figure out a technique that I felt comfortable enough to achieve the quality of weaving that I can do. And I think when I was doing this, I had just done my first residency in Japan, and where I did weaving there, they all start with white yarn. They all dye their own yarn to achieve the colours. It's much like here, where all the yarns are dyed in-house here as well. So that was a process that I was really interested in. And then the next one is this inspiration. This is another piece that was in Wangaratta Petite exhibition. The inspiration for these pieces, this piece was, I saw a documentary on the tsunami in Japan, and the government noticed that there was a high fatality in deaf people during the tsunami, and they realized that they couldn't hear the warnings and the alarms, the system that they used to warn people. But there was one survivor who was a deaf person who noticed the behavior of his cats and then went outside of his house, and he communicated with his neighbors by writing in his notebook that he carried all the time. Then I started thinking about other disabilities, how blind people would see artwork. How do they communicate? And so the languages that, because they're usually spoken or written, I started thinking about languages that were more tactile, so Braille. And then I also saw another documentary on Inca tradition where they talk about the system for kipu, which is a system of knots to for them to record text and numbers and other things. And so I thought I would like to weave something in Braille. And then, so design, have to look up the Braille alphabet, and then I realized it's a grid. I love grids. And so I set that up, a bit of calculations, and I also wanted to use a white yarn so that a seeing person can't differentiate it easily either. So that the words and the background are the same, and I guess in a way so that maybe they might understand a little bit about what happens when you can't see very well. And next one. So the accumulation of all of that work brings me to this, these works that I'm doing here, and it's to do with what I call spatial layering. It's also came out about when I was in Japan. I visited a traditional entertainment building that had been turned into a museum. My friend who's Japanese took me there because I said to her, I really want to see something that normal tourists wouldn't see, and something that is really special. And her husband is an architect, so she consulted with him and found something that he thought I might like. And previous to the building being turned into a museum, only men could visit that building. And it was where they drink, be entertained. And so when we went through all the designs of the rooms, we looked at went through all the rooms, we looked at the design, how the rooms were used and how they were used to look outwards to the gardens, and how the division of the rooms were used, because they could be open, they could be closed to form smaller rooms. And so that was sort of we looked at layering of spaces and the transition of spaces. And some of the things that came up were, how do we see things? What do we focus on? So in this instance, examples that relate to these theories were, in the first picture, if I focus my eyes on the reflection, I see the building that is being reflected. But if I focus my eyes on the actual drainage plate, I see the textures and the patterns in that rather than the reflection. So there are things that you can see briefly, and there are things that you can see permanently, because when the sun goes away, those reflections will disappear. And then in the second photo, it is when you're looking at the face of the timber, it looks like a flat surface, but when you look at the shadows beyond, you can see that it is a three-dimensional surface. So when I'm looking at these and in the weaving, I feel like, how can I trap that that change from flat to three-dimensional, or from shadow to the actual background. So being in this space, it's very inspiring, because there's so many layers of things that are happening in the workshop. There are layers of warp on the different looms, and when they're put next to each other or one behind each other, depending on where my eye focus, I see different things. And then there's also looking at the space, or looking at the work that's there, the essential elements that's required for weaving, but they often recede into the background when you're looking at the activity that's going on. So when I look at these images that I've taken, it depends where my eye is focusing, whether I'm seeing the frames, whether I'm seeing the space, whether I'm seeing the shadows, whether I'm seeing the lines of warps in front of me. And then this is the piece that I submitted to Wangaratta last year, and it is what started this concept of spatial layering. So it's hard to see it in a photo because it's static, but when you see a piece like that, when you're walking around it or looking at it, you would have catch a little bit of the white and then not see it anymore. you would have caught a bit of the darker piece that's trapped in the middle. But as you walk around it, you will start seeing it in a different way. It just sort of disappears. And depending on the lighting, sometimes the background recedes and the other things come forward. So a bit like how we see things. And then, and so we get to this part where thinking about the material and the technique. So I've got some vintage linen that I've collected in my stash for a long time, and with part of my practice is I'm trying to use up the yarn that I've got, rather than buy new yarn each time when I think, oh, I don't have the right material. So I try to make what I have work for what I wanted to do. And also some of the other material, the thrums that I can use from here, the warp threads, the leftover weft threads. So I'm using them in the warp and the weft at the same time to try and convey what I see here. Yeah. And then at the end, I'm a weaver.